Okay. Parshas Vayakel, Parshas Para. We'll see. I don't know if I'm going to have time to get to Parshas Para tonight. We may have to talk about Parshas Para on Shabbos. But we'll have to figure that out. But so we'll start with Parshas Vayakel. And it's very hard to leave Megillas Esther, no? It's Pashut hard to leave it. So let me just point out one thing. When I get to the beginning of Parshas Vayakel and the ha'ara that my Rosh Yeshiva once said based on the first Rashi in Parshas Vayakel on the Megillah. The pasuk, the beginning of Parshas Vayakel says, "Vayakel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael vayomer aleim." Moshe gathered together the Gans Klal Yisrael, and he started to tell them the mitzvah of the Binyan HaMishkan. He started with Shabbos and went on to the mitzvah of the Binyan HaMishkan. Vayakel, Rashi says, it doesn't say v'kohal. He says it's a lashon hif'il. Hif'il means not that he gathered them, but that he caused them to gather. Vayakel Moshe. And Rashi says the reason why it says a lashon of Vayakel, that he caused them to gather, and not that he gathered them, Zok Rashi, she'enoi oisef anoshim biyodayim. You don't gather, you're not gathering apples. When you say you gather people, Eloheim ne'esofim al pi diburai. They are gathered through his, I say something, I say let's come together, and that causes them to gather. That's what Rashi says. Fractor of Yonason. Why did Esther say to Mordechai, Lech knois kol haYehudim, to go gather all of the Jews? It should say Tachnes kol haYehudim, cause the Jews to gather. Not like the Rashi and Vayakel. It's a good kasha. He said an unbelievable thing. He said, and this is like Me'inyan, some of the conversations that we've had and the shiurim that we've had leading up to Purim and on Purim, that we know that the chisaron, the pagam that Klal Yisrael had, that led to the gzeira of Haman, was that they became shakua in physicality. Right? Nehenu misudase shel Isai Rasha. They became shakua in Inyanei Haguf, and they did not succeed in keeping the guf and the neshama unified. So he said that Memela, because of that, he said, therefore, when Esther Amalka told Mordechai to gather Yidden, he spoke a little more as if they were gufim. It says, "She'enoi oisef anoshim biyodayim." You don't gather people by hand. Why? Because they're balei das. You tell them to gather and they come. If they weren't balei das, they were animals, you would have to gather them. But if they're balei das, you just say, Rabbi Say, let's come together. And because they're balei das, they respond to that. But since the whole pagam, as they became less ruchni and more gashmi, so to be merames to that, the terminology that was used was the terminology that you would do to a thing and not to a baldas. Pilei ployim. So that was just my last. It's hard to say goodbye to the Megillah. So Naftali, it's fascinating, no? Okay, I want to go to Parshas Vayakel again. My guess is that we're not going to get to Para tonight. If we have a few minutes in the end, maybe we'll do it. But let's let's focus on one thing at a time. I do have a little bit of an agenda to talk about Parshas Vayakel because I feel like it's one of those ignored parshias. Because it seems like it's just a repeat of Parshas Truma, and there's very few Rashis. And I think that I think it's an important hashkafa to look at every parsha that we have as an opportunity to learn and to see what the parsha is teaching us. And it's like, Momo, I would love to, I like this, I would love to put out a sefer on Parshas Vayakel and Pekudei. A sefer on Vayakel Pekudei. Like I think there are a lot of Rabbanim around the world. I shouldn't speak badly, but a lot of Rabbanim around there are like, sure, at least it's Parshas Parah also. But no, we have to be able to learn every Parsha and try to, there's endless Torah and lessons to learn from every Parsha. So let me tell you what, I'm going to tell you over something that came together slowly over years, and I think that you'll enjoy it. And there's a lot to learn from it. So, Parshas Vayakel begins with the Parsha of Shabbos, and it then goes on to describe the Melechas HaMishkan. It goes from Shabbos to the Mishkan. The Sfas Emes points out that Parshas Kisisa does the exact opposite. Parshas Kisisa, which is the end, right? Truma Tetzava Kisisa is the end of the Hakamas HaMishkan, the end of the Binyan HaMishkan, the end of describing the Kalim of the Mishkan and the Big Day Kohen Gadol. Then you have V'shamru B'nai Yisrael Es HaShabbos, you have the Parsha of Shabbos. So while in Parshas Kisisa you have, which is again before the Egel, Parshas Kisisa you have the end of the Mishkan, and then Shabbos. In Parshas Vayakel, you have Shabbos and then the Mishkan. Haloi Davaru. But not only that, there's a little bit of a difference between the pasuk that talks about Shabbos and in Parshas Kisisa and the pasuk that talks about Shabbos in Parshas Vayakel. In Parshas Vayakel, it says, Sheishes Yamim Te'aseh Malacha. For 6 days, Te'aseh, Malacha should be done. Right? It doesn't mean to do Malacha, that would be Ta'aseh Malacha. Sheishes Yomim Te'aseh Malacha. For 6 days, Malacha should be done. In Parshas Kisisa, it says, Sheishes Yomim Ye'aseh Malacha. Which means, for 6 days, Malacha should be done. It means the same thing. What's the difference between Sheishes Yamim Ye'aseh Malacha and Sheishes Yamim Te'aseh Malacha? What do you think? So to the best of my knowledge, which is not so strong, but to the best of my knowledge, there's no difference. Sheishes Yamim Ye'aseh Malacha is looking at Malacha as a Lashon Zachar, and it's saying Malacha should be done, B'Lashon Zachar. And Sheishes Yamim Te'aseh Malacha is saying Malacha should be done looking at it as an Akeva. Right? We know there are many words in Chumash that could be Mishamesh Zachar and be Mishamesh Nekeva. So Malacha apparently is one of those words. And in Parshas Kisisa, it's Ye'aseh Malacha. And in Parshas Vayakel, it's Te'aseh Malacha. Means the same thing. One of them is referring to Malacha as a Zachar, and one of them is referring to Malacha as a Nekeva. Sounds reasonable? But I want to explain the Ezras Hashem is why is the Shabbos in Parshas Kisisa is Malacha expressed as a Zachar, and why in the Shabbos in Parshas Vayakel is Malacha expressed as an Akeva. So I think the pshat is like this. Shabbos, I just have a lashon of a Taisus, that's why I'm looking inside here. Shabbos, the Taisus in Ksubis, Daf Heyom et Aleph, Taisus says that Shabbos is a lashon nekeva because it says mechaleleha mois yumois. Those who are mechalel her get a chi of misa. So Shabbos is a lashon nekeva, but afal pikein it's also a lashon zachar because it says kol ha'oise boy melacha yumas. Boy is lashon zachar. So fascinating. Taisvus and Ksubas says that Shabbos itself is also a lashon zachar and a lashon nekeva. It's Shabbos the king or Shabbos the queen. It's a lashon zachar or a lashon and it could be a lashon zachar, it could be a lashon nekeva. What's the pshat that Shabbos could be a lashon zachar and it could be a lashon nekeva? So there's a yesod about Shabbos. Before I say the yesod about Shabbos, I have to say a yesod about lashon zachar and lashon nekeva. in Torah, we have Zachar and Nekeva in many, many areas. We have the concept of Zachar and the concept of Nekeva. But in many Tchumim, you find this idea that the Zachar represents the concept of giving or being mashpia, and the Nekeva is the concept of receiving or being mushpa. Even the process of an ish v'isha, in the process of Leda, so the ish gives over from himself to the isha, and she's makabel that, and then turns that siruf into a child. But the isha is there to be makabel. Okay, so there's this klal that you find in many, many areas, that when there's a zachar and there's a nekeva, the zachar is the giver and the nekeva is the recipient. This is not to say that the zacharim aren't makabel and that nekevas don't give. That's not to say that. Zachar and nekeva is an abstract musag that with the relationship between zachar and nekeva is looked at that way in many tchumen in the Torah. And you find such a thing with Shabbos. And that's why it would make sense that Shabbos is called both the Zachar and the Nekeva. Because you find that there's an element of Shabbos that the 6 days of the week are a lead up to Shabbos. We work and work and work, and then we're Zeicha to Shabbos. A little bit like the 6,000 years of the world, right? Right, like Shabbos is me'ein olam haba, that there's avoda and avoda and avoda and avoda, and then you're ready for Shabbos in the end. Kol malachtecha asuya. You lead up to being ready for Shabbos. A lot of us envision Shabbos that way. After a whole week, then you have Shabbos. That's one element of Shabbos. In that sense, Shabbos is being the nekeva. Shabbos is receiving the malacha of the whole week. It's all coming and being mashpia onto Shabbos. All my work the whole week is then coming and approaching Shabbos. Likras Shabbos lechu v'neilcha, the Rosh Yeshiva once said. We go towards Shabbos. Let's go towards Shabbos, we say in Kabbalah Shabbos. Okay. But there's another element of Shabbos. Shabbos energizes us. Shabbos is a zman of ruchnius that provides us with chizuk and koyach and energy and a foundation with which to go out into the Yemei HaShavua. We feel that, right? Shabbos Shabbos restores us, resets us a little bit, and gives us gives us something with which we can go out into the week. Kihi mekar habracha. The continuation of the sentence. Because Shabbos is not just the thing that we work towards, it's also the source of bracha. And that's the beauty. Every Shabbos is the end of the week before and the beginning of the next week. And every Shabbos we take all of our avodah, all of our nisyonos that we worked with, all of our challenges, and everything, and we finally were zeicha to Shabbos, and then we use that Shabbos to get the koyach to generate more koyach for the week to come. And that's why you find that Shabbos could have an inyan of nekeva when you're working towards Shabbos, mechalaleha mois, and Shabbos also has an inyan of zachar, which is that it's mashpia, that kihim makar habracha, that it's the source that you go from. And Saif Maisa, very interesting. Very interesting. I don't know if he said it, but it's very, very interesting. It's certainly the same in the sense of this balance, the Rosh and the Saif. Certainly, very, very good. And that's the pshat. Rav Dessler points out that that's the pshat also why you fight. You know, there's this interesting shinoi in the Shabbos davening, right? You know about this? Yeah, right? Yanuchu ba, yanuchu bay, yanuchu bam. Right? You familiar with that? You should know this because it's in Shemon Esrei. It could be that a lot of people don't realize it because they think maybe it's just different girsais or they never noticed it. But in davening, Shabbos davening. So Friday night, I'm turning to Friday night davening. What? Friday night davening. Elokeinu b'kei avseinu retzevim nuchaseinu, right? Shemana Esrei. You end off Hanchilenu Hashem Elokeinu ba'ava u'v'ratzin Shabbos kodshecha v'yonuchu ba Yisrael mekadeshei shemecha. That Klal Yisrael will rest in her. That's Shabbos as a nekeva. But Momo, go to Shabbos day davening. Same Shemana, same Elokeinu b'kei avseinu, right? Exactly the same words, with one slight difference. V'yonuchu v'y Yisrael mekadeshei shemecha. And if that's not all, turn to Mincha on Shabbos. And by Mincha, I'm turning here to Mincha. By Mincha it says, V'yonuchu bam Yisrael, in them. So Rav Dessler points out that Shabbos has an element that it receives the Avodah of the whole week. And Shabbos has an element that it generates koyach and avodah for the following week. And by the time Shabbos is over, you've experienced both together, both elements together. That's Yonuchu Bam. And Rav Dessler even points out, I think it's Rav Dessler, even points out that when Shabbos starts, what you're feeling then, what you're experiencing then, is the Shabbos that you've been running towards. So the night, Shabbos is the nekeva. But by the time the morning comes, so now you're ready to start building for weiter. So then it's Yonuchu Bay. And then when Shalosh Shudas comes, you've already experienced both. There's the unique blend of appreciating both elements of Shabbos together, which is a lot more to that, but for now. Okay, so that's the inyan with Shabbos. Okay. Good? You've heard this before? What? Let's take it another step. Zok the Sfas Emes, I said the Sfas Emes says the Ha'ara, but I didn't say what he answers. Sfas Emes points out that in Parshas Ki Sisa, Shabbos comes at the end of the Binyan HaMishkan. And in Parshas Vayakel, Shabbos comes at the beginning of the Binyan HaMishkan. Says the Sfas Emes, it's a mashal to both inyanim of Shabbos. The Binyan HaMishkan, that's the Avodah. That's our Avodah. That's our work. Our Avodah is Hashem that we do. Right? So Ein Binyan Beis HaMikdash Daicha Shabbos, right? That's where we learn the Lamed Tes Malachas from. Right? So when Shabbos comes, we rest from that Avodah. So in Parshas Ki Sisa, it's the Shabbos that we're going towards. So that's why we have the Binyan HaMishkan, and then we have Shabbos. Yonuchu Ba. And Parshas Vayakel, it's the Binyan HaMishkan that it's the Binyan HaMishkan that's being mushpa from Shabbos. The Shabbos is generating the koyach for the avodah to come. So Parshas Vayakel starts with Sheishis Yom Teyasa Malacha and goes weiter into the Binyan HaMishkan. Okay, one more step. The step is like this. Im keinim hadvarim, if this is true, so then it comes out. Oh, I'm sorry, two more steps. Zok this Sfas Emes, but still, it's true that Parshas Ki Sisa represents the Shabbos that we're working towards, and Parshas Vayakel represents the Shabbos that's the wind at our sails. But why is Parshas Ki Sisa that Shabbos and Parshas Vayakel that Shabbos? Zok the Sfas Emes, because the Chet was in between. Sfas Emes says that before the Chet, we didn't need as much the chizuk of the Ruchnias behind us. We are doing the Avodah, and we're working towards Shabbos. But once there was a Chet or Egel, so now the week is a hard week, where we're after a Chet. So the Adarabah, then we need the Me'ayin Olam Haba. Shabbos, we're not Mazkir Chet. There's no Korban Chatos on Shabbos. Shabbos is from a world that's beyond Chet. We don't do tshuva on Shabbos. Even though Shabbos is Oisi is tshuva, it is a tshuva, but we don't do vidui and so on Shabbos. So on Parshas Vayakel, which is after the Chet Egel, right? Mamish right after the Chet Egel. Right, the day Moshe Rabbeinu comes down after getting the next luchos, so now we have to be machazik. So we start with Shabbos, which leads in to the Yemei HaShavua, which, by the way, is the way the world was. Right, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, There were 6 days that led to Shabbos. But then on the 6th day, Adam Rishon did a chet. His world of Achar HaChet was Shabbos, and then the Yemei HaShavua. Right? He was thrown out of Gan Eden, Matzah Shabbos. It started with Shabbos, and then the Yemei HaShavua. That's that first Havdalah that Adam Rishon said, that Adam Rishon made a Bayrei Ma'irei Ha'esh, the Perek Rabbi Elazar says, because in Gan Eden, it was always light. Right? The Aragonas was Meshamish in Gan Eden. When he was thrown out of Gan Eden, he was suddenly in the dark for the first time. And he had a pachad from the dark. And Nishtalach loy amud shel eish. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent him a pillar of fire to show him the way and to alleviate his tsar. And Omad ve'omar Baruch Atah Hashem Bayrei Ma'irei Ha'esh. That's why we make up Bayrei Ma'irei Ha'esh on Matzah Shabbos. So that's that Shabbos is behind me, and now I'm going from Shabbos into the days of the week. Okay? If that's the case, we go to the last step. If that's the case, that means like this. That in Parshas Ki Sisa, we were working towards Shabbos. So Shabbos is the Nekeva. So then the Malacha is the Zachar. Right? The work becomes the thing that's being mashpia, and Shabbos becomes the thing that's accepting the hashpah. Oh, Sheishes Yamim, yei aseh malacha. But in Parshas Vayakel, where Shabbos is what's Shabbos is what's generating the shefa, and then the days of the week are receiving kayach from Shabbos. So in Parshas Vayakel, it's Sheishes Yamim, tei aseh malacha. That's the shtickle. And I think that it's beautiful in the Psukim and in the Yesod, but it's also for us, it's a little bit of a lesson about how to be misyaches to Shabbos. You know, we're Maina every single day to Shabbos. The Ramban says that part of what we're Makayim, part of the way that we're Makayim Zachar Esir Shabbos L'Kadshay is that we count each day to Shabbos. That's why we say the Yom, Hayom Yom Rishon, Hayom Yom Sheni, Hayom Yom Shlishi. We're counting down to Shabbos. The Rambam talks about being Metzape L'Bias HaShabbos. The person waits for Shabbos. I'm working hard the whole week, and when I say working hard, I don't mean making money. Working hard, that's the tuffle. The ikar is that I'm working hard trying to do what's right for myself, for my mishpacha, for my achrayas, for my avodas Hashem. I have a mission. And I wait to bring it all to Shabbos. The Shabbos is like the shleimus of my avodah. Shabbos is kol malachtecha asuya, when I enjoy the fruits of my labor. Misha torach be'erev Shabbos, yoichal b'Shabbos. Right? When you work hard on erev Shabbos, which is all the Yemei HaShavua, then you have what to eat on Shabbos. That's the nachas and the menucha of a good hard week's work. That's one element of Shabbos. But also we soak up Shabbos. We try to learn on Shabbos. We try to grow on Shabbos. We try to daven differently on Shabbos. We finally are able to daven at a pace that we can hear ourselves think. So Shabbos is as man to chaparayim because it also energizes me moving forward. It helps me move past Shabbos into the Yemei HaShavua with geschmack and with lichtigkeit and so on. And it's important to have that sense to cherish Shabbos. By tzaddikim, Shabbos was a central focus of their life. My Rashiva always used to say that there's such a thing, I don't know if you ever heard him say this, there's such a thing as a Shabbos Dika Yid. Some Yidden are just Shabbos Dika Yidden. He described, I'm just looking at my clock here, and I didn't want to say something else, but I also don't want to not say this Maisa, so it's torturous, but he said that what? Yeah, he said that the first week that Rav Volba came to the Mir, to Rabbi Yerucham in Europe, so he came towards the end of the week. You ever heard this? Mm-hmm. He came. You heard from him? Pretty sure. Yeah. It's interesting when he used to say this story. He didn't say who he was talking about. He didn't say who the Bachar was, and he didn't say who the Mashgiach was. At least that's what I heard. I heard it from him when I was sitting by his Shabbos table, 22 HaKablan, and with a few Bachrim, And he started to talk about being a Shabbos Dika Yid, and he said there was a person, and then he came to a yeshiva, and then there was a mashgiach, and then that person was. By the time he was done, we couldn't figure out who was what, because he was trying to keep everything. Oto Adam, Oto. It was just the whole thing became very hard to figure out. But I know that it was Reb Volba because in the Sefer Mitzvahs Hashkulos, Reb Volba writes the story. I was like, he writes it about himself. So he says that he came to the Mir. And it was towards the end of the week, and he met the mashgiach. They say, this he doesn't write, but they say that Rabbi Yerucham had a very special chavivus for him, for Reb Volba. He saw a lot in him. And then came Shabbos, and young Shlomo Volba comes into the Mir, and he can't find the mashgiach. Someone else sitting in his seat. So interesting, someone else sitting there. And it took a while for him to realize, that was him. That was Rabbi Yerucham. But Shabbos was just he was such a Shabbos-dika person. It was like a metamorphosis, and his whole affect and his whole way that he presented himself. He was so engulfed. It was such an avodah to him Shabbos that you couldn't compare the way he looked during the week and the way he looked on Shabbos. Rav Volba writes that he didn't know who it was. This person that he just met yesterday. It was unbelievable. That's Shabbos. So it's just something to keep in mind. The lesson, Sheishas Yamim Ye'os Melacha and Sheishas Yamim Te'os Melacha. Should I keep going until we have a minyan? I just want to point out, Parshas Vayakel, there's another place where you find the same thing, where something is Meshamish Lashon Zachar and something is Meshamish Lashon Nekeva. And that is the Mishkan itself. It says... it's actually it says, it's just unbelievable. In the same pasuk, it's talking about the kalei hachotzer, the curtains of the chotzer. It says eis kalei hachotzer in the long lists of things in Parshas Vayakel, es amudov ve'es adoneho. It's unbelievable. I think it's the only pasuk you find like that. It's not in two separate psukim. It's es amudav ve'es adoneho. It's half level. Rashi says ze echad min hamakoymes shemila achas yichayil l'shtamish kezachar and nekeva. But it's mamish es amudav ve'es adoneho. You're not even making believe it's one way. You literally the kalei hachatzer es amudav ve'es adoneho. So there's a lot to be ma'ayin in terms of why dafka the kalei hachatzer is the place where this expresses itself. But I just want to point out, based on what we've been saying, that the Mishkan itself has that inyan of Zachar and Nekeva, in the sense that we know that the Chazal tell us that the Mikdash Shel Mata is mechuven keneged the Mikdash Shel Maila. And they also say that the Mikdash Shel Maila is mechuven keneged the Mikdash Shel Mata. There's different drushes. Machain l'shivtecha pa'alta Hashem. Al tikri machain ela mechuven. So which is it? The mata is connected the maila, or the maila is connected the mata? So there's a Shla HaKadosh that says that it's both. On one side, the Mishkan is mashpia on us lamata. The Mikdash Shel Maila is mashpia. The bracha and the shefa comes milamayla lamata. On the other hand, through our avodah, we lift up, we send shefa back up to Shamayim, we generate zechuyas with our own avodah. So in that sense, it makes sense, es amudav ve'es adoneha. In the sense that we're receiving the Mikdash Shel Maila is mechuven, the Mikdash Shel Mata is we're mechuven keneged the Mikdash Shel Maila. We're receiving milamayla, which is always like that. We're receiving from above. We're receiving siyata d'shmaya. But there's this ongoing relationship where we receive from Hashem and then we try to give and serve Hashem. Mitzad of serving Hashem, then we're the zachar, then we're the mashpia, and that's the amudav. When we're the recipients, that's the adoneha. So even though we described Shabbos in both ways, Klape the Mishkan, but it's just interesting that the Mishkan itself also has both of those attributes. So when we describe that the Mishkan leads to Shabbos, so it's not just that Shabbos is the Nekeva there, but the Mishkan is the Zachar. And when we describe that the Shabbos leads to the Mishkan, it's not just that Shabbos is the mashpia there, but that the Mishkan is being makabel. So there's an element of Zachar and Akeva in both Shabbos and the Mishkan, and we should take a bizaycha to be able to accomplish on Shabbos what we're able to accomplish. Be'ezer Hashem Yashakaya.